emerge inside you, Antaro Guruhu, and he will let you know what is relevant to you, what is pertinent to you, and what is proper to you with your framework, with your physical, physiological, psychological makeup. And when you have gone through this stage, then this is not got in a flash of understanding. This has to be achieved and made a part of yourself intensely by absorption. You should lose yourself in that pursuit, in that search, and this is called nididhyasana. So this Shravana, Manana, nididhyasana, learning, then secondly cogitating, reflecting, and then concentrating or absorption. The entire being is involved in it. This is nididhyasana. So nididhyasana. I'll give you the synopsis in any case. Now, the Upanishads also went about systematically examining human experience. It contains profound epistemological insights, and it contains a detailed analysis of consciousness. One of the achievements of the Upanishads is the analysis, an intense analysis of the three states through which we all pass through, which I mentioned in my last lecture: the wakefulness, the dream, and deep sleep. So in wakefulness, there is the dichotomy, there is the duality, there is the world and you, I and the world, I, mine, and this. I, this, according to Buber. So this I and you, I and this dichotomy is prevalent in the waking state. And it is because of this that all the stress is brought about. All the stress in life is because of this dichotomy of the individual and the world around him. There are certain things that you appropriate to yourself. Ahamidam, mamedam. This body is mine. Sense organs are mine. So you have appropriated. And what the body wears, the clothes, this is mine. And where the house the house where you live, this is mine. So there is a systematic appropriation of a part of the world to yourself. This appropriation is the adhyasa or the incorporation of things around you which really are not you as yourself. This will give rise to a lot of stresses and strains. The abhimana. Things don't belong to you, but you think it belongs to you. You belong nowhere, but you think that you belong somewhere. So I come and sit here on this chair, but I can't take this chair with me, or I can't identify my property with this chair. So we often lose this sense of the barrier or the line that distinguishes between what really am I and what really I am not, what belongs to me, what does not belong to me. Well, this confusion of I with this is the dominant feature of the wakeful condition, because the sense organs are operating, sense organs fragment, they structure the outside world for you. The outside world, which is a big booming confusion, you structure it into sounds, forms, smells, tastes. This is what is done by the sense organs. But this is not a detail of the outside world at all. And then the mind goes along with it and it says this is nice, this is not nice, this is good, this is bad, this is mine, this is not mine. So sense organs and mind, they play havoc with us during the wakeful state. And there is a further trouble. We try to imagine that this wakeful state is the only normal state, and a departure from this is dream. A further departure is sleep. But the Upanishads seek to set the house in order. He said, you are not living in wakefulness alone, you also dream. When you are dreaming, this wakeful world collapses. That does not exist. There you there you go on an elephant, while you can't do it in a waking. So dream world has its own reality, has its own space, has its own time, has its own coordinates, and has its own rationale. Well, dream is as real as wakefulness. Why should you imagine that wakefulness alone is real and dream is not real? Dream also is real. Further, there is what is called sleep, to which we all go willy-nilly. Nobody does not want to go to sleep. Want to sleep, the Upanishads say, is the most natural state. Swam apito bhavati swapiti ityuchyate. In wakefulness, you go about in places which are not yours. You transact with things that are not yours. And as a result of it, you tend to fatigue yourself. In dream, you have the desire. The desire makes you run here and thither. Yah kamayate saswapnan pasyati. Yo nakamayati saswapnan napasyati. The dream is the product of desire. If you desire, you dream. And the desires will take fabulous, fantastic forms. So that's why the dreams are bizarre. The desire takes 200 forms, 220 forms as the Upanishad says. Well, these are all bizarre, but the desire is yours. But in sleep, what distinction of sleep? The Upanishads say, Swam apito bhavati. You go to yourself in dream, in deep sleep. You go to yourself. And that's why it's called rest. That's why it is refreshing. So sleep is really the genuine condition of man. And the other two states are departures from it. Yatha shenaha srantaha. Just as a bird tied to a post runs hither and thither, trying to escape, and finding no way out, settles down at the post. Even so, man runs hither and thither in wakefulness and dream, and not finding rest absolutely, and having been fatigued, srantaha, having been fatigued, he comes back to himself and sleeps. Bandhanamevopasrayate tadha swapiti. He sleeps, finding absolute rest in himself. And the Upanishads go a step further and say, the sleep state is the real existence, supreme existence. That is the Brahma condition. That is the divine condition. And there is a story in the Upanishads of a man who was the son of a rich man. But he thought that the rich man has squandered all his wealth. There was no money left for him, and he had an old house, and he was left in dire distress and poverty. So he was walking about the house, bemoaning his lot. But the old man who died had hidden all the treasure underneath the floor. So he moves about on the floor continuously, thinking that he is a poor man, not knowing that there is treasure right beneath his feet, and on which he is moving all the way. And the Upanishads say, aharaha, every day we are going to Brahman. Every day we are accomplishing the supreme thing that we want to accomplish. And when we are awake, we bemoan our lot, we are not this, we are not that, we are distressed. So the Upanishads point out the state of sushupti or deep, dreamless, profound sleep is the real Brahma stage, and all attempt to seek Brahman is only to get the flavor of that experience when we are awake. This is all that we need to do. And in this, they made use of the term that which pervades you. There is the sleep state which pervades your existence, over which the dream state and the wakefulness is they are written. So this thing which does not leave you, which does not go away from you even for a moment, this they call the Atman. Tama is pervasion. Atma is that which pervades you through all your structure and through all the conditions that you pass through. This Atma is the Brahma really. The Brahma, or that experience which is ineffable, indescribable, like when you are asleep, you don't know that you are sleeping. You can't tell anybody that you are sleeping very well. But when you get up, you say, Sukhamaham aswapsam, I slept very well. So this notion of your having slept is a sort of a retrospection. It comes after the stage is gone. But when you are asleep, you don't know yourself, you don't know the world. This is one abysmal thing. As the verse in the Rig Veda says, Ambhaha kimasid gahanam gabhiram. This mystery of human existence, which is profound and endless, this is really inside us. Every time, every minute we breathe, but we are not normally aware of it. So the Upanishads say, turn your attention inward, focus your attention inward. Atmanam va vijaniyat. Know yourself. Anya vacho vimunchatha. Leave off all other talk. So the Upanishads steered clear of the rituals on the one hand and a medley of the gods on the other. The gods are of no interest to the Upanishads at all. And they pointed out that every man is heir to the supreme realization. Only he must put forth the tapas, which is very necessary. So shall I stop there? Shall I? Only ritual. Every Veda has these four aspects. Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. So Yajurveda also has a few Upanishads. Samveda also has a few Upanishads. But the Yajurveda, as I said, is merely an excerpt from the Rig Veda used for ritualistic purposes. And the Samhita gives only the main guidelines. This sacrifice has to be performed in this manner, etc. But what the details are, they are mentioned in the Brahmanas. So Samhita, as in the Rig Veda, is merely an inspired utterance. It does not give the prescriptions. So Vidhi and the Arthavada, that's the bulk of the Brahmanas. So that's why I mentioned Veda is one really. That's Rig Veda. And all the other Vedas are taken from Rig Veda for various Viniyoga or the applications. That's why I said as you go back, the dates become very woolly and uncertain. We are not sure. And among the scholars, there is a group of scholars who try to bring the date down to as recent times as possible. All the Western Indologists, they would not like to refer to the Vedas as of hoary antiquity. But the Indians have always try to push it back to the beginning of the times. So Veda was the first breath of the God, so it goes back to the creation. It's very hard to say, but looking at the style of the chandas, the language, it is certainly earlier than the days of Panini and Patanjali, because Panini mentions the Vedic chandas. So Panini's date is given as 5th century BC. So these Vedas must be much earlier. And the Vedas themselves give an account of some states like Kurukshetra, Panchala, Kuru Panchalas, Videha, which is altogether unknown to the historical period. So based on these few details, we can refer back to about 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, that's what Bal Gangadhar Tilak and others have arrived at. 5,000 years ago, roughly. BC is one date that's given. But if you leave the Vedic Samhitas, there is also a tradition that much of the Veda is lost. So Anantavai Vedaha, because it's an oral tradition, what remains to us in about 10,000 and odd hymns, this is not all that the Veda consisted of. Vedas must have consisted of other hymns also. But the present compilation is due to one Katyayana, who wrote also the Anukramani. He fixed the Padapatha, he divided all the suktas into ashtakas and vargas, mandalas and suktas. This is pre-Panini. So even this was done earlier than Panini. So the Samhitas themselves must be very old. And secondly, the Buddhist texts, as you know, Buddha lived about 2,500 years ago, more than 2,500 years ago. In some of the preserved teachings of the Buddha, sayings of the Buddha, there is a mention of Veda and Upanishad. And he says, what I am teaching you is Esa Vedopanisado. This is the Vedas and the Upanishad. So Buddha knew the Vedas and the Upanishads. So Upanishads were earlier. And I was going to deal with it tomorrow. The folk tradition and the sophisticated tradition, elite tradition that I mentioned, Samkhya, Yoga and the Lokayata, they were folk. By folk we mean that which existed from time immemorial. Whenever a group of people were there, when they talked about, when they had nothing else to do, when they were the bourgeois or the leisurely class, they talked about philosophy. So what arose from this is the Samkhya and Yoga and the Lokayata. So the Samkhya, Yoga and the Lokayata, these are described in Mahabharata as Sanatane. You can't ascertain the date for them. So some of the Vedic hymns presuppose the Samkhya, Yoga and Lokayata. So the Samkhya and Lokayata come in to great prominence in the treatment of the Atharva Veda, because Atharva Veda was the one which tried to bridge the gap between the folk and the elite. So there you get Samkhya, Yoga and Lokayata in a very big way. So among the Darshanas, Samkhya to my mind appears to be the oldest Darshana, even pre-Vedic. Samkhya and Yoga, some sort of yoga must have been prevalent all along, some sort of asceticism, magic and supernatural works. So this yoga, Samkhya and Yoga must have been very, very old. And some of the yogins have been mentioned in the Rig Veda. There is a sukta called the Keshi Sukta, where the yogic practices are mentioned. And the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha That has been mentioned in the Rig Veda also. So on the folk side, the Samkhya and Yoga, and as a combination of these, as an evolute of these, was Buddhism. Because in the life story of the Buddha, we find that when he left home, he went to a teacher called Arada Kalama, who was supposed to be a yoga teacher. He lived with him for 6 months. He was dissatisfied. Then he moved over to another teacher, Rudraka Ramaputra. He was a Sankhyan teacher. Then Gautama was dissatisfied with both of them. Then he went to Uruvilva and practiced tapas all alone, and he lived for 7 years in the jungles and obtained the enlightenment. But in the making of the Buddha, Samkhya and Yoga have entered. That's what I was trying. So when we speak of these darshanas, it is very hard to give the dates, but it does not matter really. Because what the Vedas contain are applicable to all people at all times, in all climate, everywhere. So that has no territorial applicability. I followed the recent historical researches. There was a time when the Aryans were supposed to have migrated from Asia Minor or beyond into what now is the northwestern frontier provinces and Punjab. But now largely that theory has been given up, that the Aryans came from nowhere. Aryans had settled down here, they belong to this place, and in Rig Veda, the word Aryan has been used in a very limited sense. Aryan, the word Aryan, as Yaska in his Nirukta says, it is derived from the root Ri. Ri is to plow the land. Arya is a plowman, is a farmer, he is an agriculturist. And he was a nobleman, being an agriculturist. So the Arya is a landed gentry, as you might say. And in the Rig Veda, you find that this Arya is not racially distinguished. They speak of the Panchajanas, 5 types of people, 5 groups of people, and Nana Deshavasinaha, or people belonging to different lands and tribes. So Rig Veda gives a picture of an amorphous population, a mixed population. So this conception of Aryan itself is now doubtful. What the Vedic people called Aryan was not the later Ambedkar's view of Arya at all. So this was the thought of Vincent Smith and others, early historians, who tried to point out that the cradle of civilization was Middle East and not India or China. So it's very hard to say. And Tilak's book on Arctic home is rather antedated. It's not historically very reliable now. In the Rig Veda, to say that it is an Aryan composition, product of Aryan culture, they mention about the Muras, they mention about the Shishnadevas, they mention about the Anasas, the noseless people. Anasas are people with snubbed nose. So there were people with long aquiline noses, as you find among the Punjabis and the Kashmiris. But there were also people with short noses. So the Veda calls them Anasas. And Mrudhravachaha, those who spoke unintelligibly, those who rolled their words in their mouths. So like this, the Rig Veda itself describes several types of people. So it is hard to say that the Rig Veda is an Aryan composition, unless some Tamilians come forward with a new finding that the Dravidians were different from the Aryans, and the Aryans learnt a lot from the Dravidians. It's more a case of prejudice than anything else that works. Yes? In fact, Chinese civilization is older than Indian civilization. Some of the books of Tao, they are older than the Rig Veda, in fact. And some of the books of I Ching, and they contain more profound inquiries. So Chinese thought is really profound. There is nothing.
How does it compare, or how does it differ from
As I said earlier, every philosophy is the product of the people. So Chinese people did not have to face the problems that we had to face. So ours was a composite culture. Theirs was not a composite culture. It was one mongoloid strand and a closed civilization. All through it was a closed civilization. But we were not. We were open to all sorts of influences. Until very recently, there were strands coming in. And we had to incorporate several other ideas. For example, during the 2nd century BC, after Alexander came and he died, he left a small satrapy in what is now the northwestern frontier provinces, or the Gandhara, what they call the Gandhara. And we have a lithic record, a stone pillar, erected by a Greek ambassador, Ionian ambassador, Heliodorus. And in the inscription, he calls himself a Paramabhagavata. Paramabhagavatassa Heliodorassa. Garudadhvaja. Garudadhvaja is the name of the pillar. So Herodotus, he came to India, he became a Paramabhagavata. So a Greek nobleman coming to India and embracing an Indian religion, would he not also bring with him the Greek influences, the Ionian influences? So this Bhagavata cult, which is rather alien to the folk or to the sophisticated religion, this is a pointer to an influence from Greece. And the Kannada's Vaisheshika Darshana, you find many influences from the Roman books. So like this, India has always been open. Chinese people didn't have this advantage or disadvantage, whatever you see. That was a closed group. And then there the rituals did not take the form of the big and small sacrifices as it did in India. So they had not to contend, with the Karmakanda as we had to. So the entire Mimamsa group, they were the ritualists. So Vedantins had to combat that. So the whole of Upanishads is to combat that Karmakanda. So which was not a problem with the Chinese. So otherwise, what the Chinese teach is very much the same as what the Vedas and Upanishads teach. That's why Buddhism could have a strong foothold there. Is it, Dr. Kapoor? During the medieval days, when the Indian population was really unmanageable, from Bengal for instance, during the Sena period, there was an influx of princes and aristocratic people from the south, from Andhra especially, and from Bengal they sought new pastures. So they went all over. So what we now call the Greater India, including Sumatra, Bali, Borneo and Burma, Tibet, Mongolia and China. So these were all at one time cultural expansions. And when Muslims made an inroad into Nalanda, as you know, was a very big university in the medieval days in Bihar, Nalanda in Bihar. There were at one time 2,000 people studying, and the library had 40,000 manuscripts, which was all destroyed by the Muslims. They made an inroad and they had sacked Nalanda for 7 days. And all the people who were there who could escape, mostly Tibetan monks, they escaped with books, escaped with their manuscripts to several places in the Himalayan region. And to find a safe haven, they crossed the Himalayan region through the various passes and had their own small settlements, especially in the Afghan land, Samarkand, Uzbekistan and others. So that's how you find that the Hindu impact in all these. And one particular group went as far as Maya in Mexico. So Indians have been a peripatetic lot. They have been moving about all the while. Excepting some of us in Karnataka, the Indians have been peripatetic. They have been moving about. So Indians have moved about a lot. That may explain but that's all work of the Middle Ages. Not that was a pure continental strand that he was speaking about, the Nazi strand. And there were also some specifications like the skin color, the type of hair that one had, and the type of voice one had, guttural or not. So there's a difference between the Low German and the High German. So he took all that into consideration and said that whoever ruled Berlin and the neighborhood were the Aryans. But there is no connection at all with our. Swastika is not particularly Indian. In Chinese there is swastika. In Mongolia there is swastika. In Tibet they have swastika. This is an old symbol. Like a circle, this is sort of a circle. Ultimately it is a circle, but it is an armed circle. But they had an inward swastika. It turned right and ours turns left. The moon, the earth, the sky, etc., etc. You don't find them in the Veda. They were during the Puranic ages, Middle Ages again. Middle Ages, when there was a sectarian population, each sect eulogized one particular god. There were Vaishnavas, Shaivas, the Shaktas, and there were the Ganapatyas. So all these gods that teem about the country now, they are the products of the medieval mind. Either in the Rig Veda or in the Upanishads, you don't find any of these gods. Rudra is there, but Rudra is not our Shiva. Vishnu is there, but Vishnu is not our Vishnu with 4 hands holding Shankha and Chakra. That Vishnu is alien to the Rig Vedic conception. Rig Veda, it eulogized. It is wrong to say they prayed for them, because as I told you, they were poetic compositions. There is a long eulogy of Ushas, dawn. Dawn is a goddess. Night is a goddess. Ratri, night is a goddess. Vyauhu, the atmosphere is a god. Savita, the sun. Sun in its various phases. The morning sun, the noon sun, the evening sun, and the moon in its various phases. The fire, the lightning, all these are gods. And curiously enough, you find that the housewife uses a stone to grind the millet. That stone considers the Upanishads in some detail. The next important landmark in the development of Indian thought is the Samkhya Yoga complex. the Upanishadic lore led to three distinct strands of thought arising out of the intellectual content of the Upanishads. The Samkhya and the Vedanta took their births. So Vedanta started in one stream and the Samkhya system started in another stream, both of them arising out of the content of the Upanishads. And in between, the practical aspects of mind control, concentration, disciplining of the senses and so on led to the crystallization of the yoga. So Samkhya, yoga and the Vedanta are the three main outlets from the Upanishadic background. Samkhya and yoga combined led in course of time to the school of Buddhism in a sense. Well, the Samkhya and yoga have always been considered as the twin systems. Even the epic Mahabharata calls it Sanatane Dve, the two eternal systems. Samkhya in particular has been a very important groundwork for all Indian thought. Whatever school of Indian philosophy, it bears some relation to the Samkhya, and among the popular conceptions of philosophical and religious ideas, Samkhya has a major role to play. Our ordinary expressions of Purusha, Prakriti, Purushartha, Indriya, Triguna, Nirguna, Saguna. So all these are from the Sankhyan background. So the Sankhyan thought has been definitive and it has been very productive. Well, scholars have discussed. Devi Prasad Rai Chaudhary, in fact, Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay has pointed out that the Samkhya is a folk cult. It is the collective thinking of the people that resulted gradually in this system. So Samkhya is of folk origin, like the yoga. Samkhya is of folk origin. And we find in the epic Mahabharata several accounts of the Samkhya system, especially in the Moksha Dharma Parva. We have a detailed account of the Samkhya system. And the well-known text Bhagavad Gita is largely a Sankhyan textbook. It's a textbook of the Samkhya. And in the Bhagavad Gita we find it mentioned as such. Samkhya Yoga, they form the major thrust of the Bhagavad Gita. Well, the Sankhyan lore is basic in many, many ways to Indian thought. For example, Ayurveda, much of Ayurveda, the Indian medicine, is rooted in the Samkhya system. The Prakriti, Purusha, Samyoga and the various types of analysis of the human body, the human mind, the human psyche. So they are all basic to the Ayurvedic system. So Charaka has placed for the Sankhyan system very prominently even in the beginning of his Samhita. Charaka Samhita is dated 78 AD. By that time Sankhya was already a crystallized system, and Sankhya gave the broad theoretical outline for the medical system. And in the Puranas, the Agamas, Sankhya comes in very importantly. In the Samhitas, like Ahirbuddhya Samhita, there is invariably an account of the Sankhya system. So it is remarkable that this Sankhyan system, which grew out of the folk thinking, attained such celebrity in Indian thought. Well, the Sankhyan system is fundamentally dualistic. It believed in two distinct principles. One, the principle of consciousness, which they called Purusha, and the primal stuff out of which the entire world is made of which the entire world is made, including the individual body. They called it the Prakriti. So Purusha and Prakriti, Prakriti is largely, roughly translated as nature, primal nature, and Purusha is the principle of awareness or consciousness. So there is this dichotomy, dualism between the Purusha on the one hand and the Prakriti on the other. So the Purusha and Prakriti are disparate in their very nature. They do not coalesce, they do not synthesize, they don't become one. They are always two distinct systems. But the material stuff out of which the world is made, the Prakriti, somehow gets into an alliance with the Purusha, and we find the creation, we find the world as so many isolate admixtures of Purusha and Prakriti. If Vedanta spoke of one Brahman and the multifarious vestments for it, Sankhyan spoke of one nature and so many consciousnesses, so many Purushas. One Prakriti. Prakriti is one, but Purushas are many. The juxtaposition between the two, the alliance between the two is called the Samyoga, Prakriti Purusha Samyoga, as a result of which evolution takes place. So Sankhyan system was perhaps the first system in the world, the first school in the world which thought in terms of developmental change in an evolutionary series. Sankhyans have a term for it, Parinama. Parinama is gradual, successive, continuous change. Change is vikara, kramavad vikaraha, anukramikaha, parinama ityuchyate. Parinama is the evolution. So nature evolves, the primal stuff evolves in the presence of the Purusha. The Prakriti has no motivating force of its own. It can't evolve on its own. But when the Purusha is there, in the presence of the Purusha, the Prakriti evolves. Like life being there, the eye can see. The life principle being in the body, the eye can see, the ear can hear. The ear can't hear on its own, the eye can't see on its own. Likewise, Prakriti is material, jada, insentient, but it is capable of change, capable of vikara, vikaravad, parinami, Prakriti. So this is a very important concept, in as much as Purusha is a witness, but a vivifying witness, a witness in whose presence everything happens. Like the life principle itself does not see. It makes use of the eye to see, it makes use of the ear to hear, it makes use of the other sense organs to receive the various sensory data. Likewise, Purusha is considered a sleeping partner in this game of evolution. The very word Purusha it signifies Puri Sete iti Purushaha. Inside the city, there is somebody who is asleep. Puri, the body is like a city. Puhu, the body, is like a city. This consciousness lies latent in it, unmanifest in it. It is not actively involved, but its mere presence makes this body do its work. So the relation between Purusha and Prakriti has several involvements. The first one is Parinama. In Indian thought, there are three types of explanations offered, three explanations offered for the world that has come to be as it is. First one is called the Arambhavada. The Nyaya Vaisheshika school posits this kind. That which was not there earlier comes into being afresh. This is called the Asatkaryavada. It was not there earlier, it comes into being now. So this is Genesis of the Christian type. Genesis comes into being, the world comes into being all afresh. It generates newer and newer facets and things and substances. This is Arambhavada, or the theory of creation. Creation is the production of new things without a relevant background. And then the other explanation offered, and that's by the Vedantins, is what is called the Vivartavada. There is one thing, it transforms itself into another. It does not lose its existence, and nothing fresh comes into existence. It just, as a result of some Maya, or some tertium quid, a third factor, becomes the cause, transforms itself into the effect. But actually the effect is not different from the cause at all. The effect is only apparent. They give the example taken for a snake in dusk. When you are not able to see things properly, a rope is lying on the ground and you are prone to perceive it as a snake. It is a snake so far as your presentational world is concerned, because you have the fear in you, there are the various reactions that are involved. So it is snake that you see, but the snake is not an objective detail. It is not a detail of the world. It is represented to you, but actually it is a rope. How did the snake come into existence? The snake is only a vivarta of the rajju. The snake is a transformation of the rope. So this is the rajju sarpa vivartan nyaya. So oftentimes a thing appears differently to you under some cloud, under some prejudicial condition, or under some restraint and constraint. But when that is withdrawn, the thing will appear in its own. So this is Vivarta. So the Vedantins call this world the Vivarta of the Brahman. There is one Brahman. Due to the avidya or the Maya, the world appears as variegated, as this and that. Samkhya took a stand quite distinctly from these two. They posited the Parinamavada. The primal nature, the stuff, is initially unmanifest, avyakta, and from this avyakta stage there is some stress which is felt in the avyakta, and they give the example of the rustle, the slight twitter on the surface of the waters in the ocean. On the sea, there is a slight rustle, there is a breeze, and there is a slight surface tension of water, which will eventually result in a wave. So that condition, which is different from the stillness of the waters and the formation of the wave, this is the initial stress, and the Sankhyans call it Mahat. Maghash is the root, Maghash is the rustle, initial disturbance, the primal disturbance. So it is no longer unmanifest. There is something which is manifest, Vyakta, but you can't make out what it is. Nama Rupa Dviviktam. You can't name it, you can't call it by a name, you can't perceive it in a form, you can't identify it as this or that, but there is some disturbance, some stress within, as a result of which this Mahat comes into being. This Mahat they call the consciousness which is getting individualized. As a result of this, the Buddhi comes into being, out of which the individuated consciousness, the Ahankara comes in, and then the mind comes in, etc., etc., and the entire course of evolution starts. So in the Parinamavada of the Sankhyans, the consciousness is the primary stuff which undergoes lot of changes, vikaravat. So Prakriti, Vikriti, the primal nature and the modifications thereof, they go on in a ceaseless series of changes, and each is knit with the other. So in the Parinamavada of the Sankhyans, an individual develops from the embryonic stage to the adult stage. They point out there is a continuity in it. And there is a sankrama from stage to stage, from phase to phase. And whatever happens to the body, the sense organs, etc., is all on a common framework. They are not disparate, they are not isolate, they are not helter-skelter, but they are all orderly. The change is orderly, and the change is included in a common framework. And there is this common framework between all the entities that you see in the universe. If there is an interrelationship between our sense organs, the five Mahabhutas, there is an interrelationship between all the things in the world, in the atmosphere, the terrestrial things, the atmospheric things, and the things beyond. They are all related with each other in a nexus. So Parinamavada points out that change is a factor of existence. Nothing can be there without change. Satta bhavayiti. Satta is existence. Thing can't exist without changing. Bhava, bhu is to become. Bhava is what becomes. When you say a thing is, you mean a thing has become. So this becoming and being, they are interwoven with each other. At no stage is there a being. We are all aspects of becoming. And those of you who are acquainted with Western thought will remember Alfred North Whitehead, one of our most prominent modern philosophers. He has written a book called Reality and the Process. Sankhyans would approve of this approach. The principle of consciousness is real, and all the modifications are processes. So the body is a process. It's a continual change. Well, you have heard of that Greek paradox that no man can take his bath in a river twice, because the river is continuously being replenished with fresh particles of water. So when you take a dip in the water and get up and take a dip the second time, the water has changed into a new river. What you call river is a constantly shifting set of particles. So you call it a river only by convention. River is not out there, river is becoming continuously. Sankhyans mention this paradox, and they point out that no man can take a dip in the river twice because his body also is changing. When you take a dip once, your body is one set of particles. When you take a dip the second time, your body has also undergone change, even as the water in which you bathe. So the Sankhyans point out, snata snanam yiticha. The bather has changed. The water in which he bathed has changed. Now this flux is the entire universe. But to bring about a coherence in the things, an interrelationship with the things, and a proper alignment of the things, there is something which is constant, which is all pervading, and which does not change, because you can think of change only against the background of something which does not change. If I can feel the ant crawling on my body is constant. The ant is shifting from one position to the other. You call it motion. So all motion, all change is only in the as contrary to something that is stagnant, that something that is real. What is this reality? Reality, they call it Purusha. Purusha is a term which they have coined to point out this is the only real thing. Everything is constantly shifting and changing. Because of this Purusha, they are related with each other. You can find a common framework for all the things. Well, the Sankhyans speak of two sargas, or two types of creation, two types of evolutions that go on. The first type of evolution is with regard to the gross and the material things. This they call the Linga Sarga. Linga is symbolic. Sarga is the process that goes on. The Linga Sarga is the development of the material aspects of existence. For example, and in Indian thought, in Indian psychology, individual is the central frame of reference, unlike in some of the Western thoughts where they take the world as the point of reference. Indian thought, whatever the school, takes the individual as the point of reference. Well, the Sankhyans say there is the Bhogayatana, there is the place where all our experience takes place, and this is the body. Bhogayatana is the body. The body is where all our experiences take place. Bhoga is experience, Ayatana is the resort or the place, Bhogayatana is the place where all experiences take place. This is the gross body, the body made up of the five fundamental elements, the Pancha Mahabhutas. So Sankhyans for the first people again to give us a notion of the five basic elements, Prithvi, Ap, Tejo, Vayu, Akasha, earth element, the fire element, the water element, the air element, and the Akasha element, the five elements which constitute the entire universe. So this body is made up of the five elements, and the body has the means of experience, the instruments of experience. This is called the Bhogopakarana. Upakarana is the instrument, Bhoga is experience. The Bhogopakarana is the instruments of experience. These are the Indriyas, the five sense organs, the Panchendriyas, the eyes, the ears, the nostrils, the tongue, and the cutaneous sensation or the skin. So there are these five sensory organs. These are called the Jnanendriyas. And then there are the five motor organs, organs for action, like the hands for prehension, feet for locomotion, etc., etc. Five. Vak, Pani, Pada, Payu, Upastha, Karmendriyani. So there are the Jnanendriyas, there are the Karmendriyas, and to go with them there is the mind, manaha, which is an internal organ. If these are called the outer organs, mind is an inner organ. So altogether there are 11 instruments of perception for us. Ekadasha indriyani. These are called the bhogopakaranas. And then there are the objects of the outside world which are experienced. There are the forms, the tastes, the sounds, the smells and other things which are experienced by us. These are the bhogya vastus. So in the first phase they speak of the linga sarga, which is outside us, external. So these are called the bhashya, and these include the body where the experience takes place, the sense organs by means of which the experience takes place, and then the objects with reference to which experiences are had. Bhogayatana, bhoga upakarana and bhogya vastu. So these constitute the linga sarga. And then on the other side we have the consciousness and the modalities of consciousness, the modes of consciousness. These are called pratyaya sarga, antara or internal. So pratyaya is a very important term in Indian thought. Ye is to go, in gatau, ye is to go. Prati iyate iti. The direction in which the movement takes place, this is called the pratyaya, or all the experiences are referred to our consciousness. We see an object. Ultimately it is referred to our consciousness, we become aware of it. If we are not aware of it, and when the sense organ sees an object, it is lost to us. And the Samkhya texts as well as the Upanishads give the example of an individual seeing somebody while walking on the road, somebody known to him but not recognizing him. And when that somebody pulls him up and says, "Didn't you see me?" And then this person will say, "I saw you but did not recognize you." So seeing is different from recognizing. The eye has seen, but the mind has not seen. The awareness is not there. So the mind does its job, the eye does its job, but the mind should be there as a witness to register this. So they say there is also an internal frame of reference, a subjective frame of reference, which they call buddhi. Buddhi is to wake up. Buddhi is that which wakes up to things. It is described figuratively as a person who sleeps and then a mango falls to the ground, grazing his ears. He wakes up, etc. It's a bhavasar, and it's a beautiful psychological analysis that you get in the Samkhya text. So how does a thought arise? How does an individual arise? How does a phenomenon take its birth? They give the example of a man who is sleeping under a mango tree with his blanket covering his head. A ripe mango falls to the ground, grazing his ears. He wakes up and he looks all round, sees a mango, stretches his arm, takes the mango in his arm, brings it near his eyes, examines it for all its details. This is what is happening in every one of our experience according to the Samkhya. Whenever you hear a sound, you wake up. Till then the consciousness was as if asleep. It was dormant. As soon as a stimulus is perceived, it wakes up. This waking up or adverting to that object, and the Sankhyans use the term avarjana. Avarjana is is related to the English verb adverting, turning, orient. So, whenever there is a stimulus in the outside world, the consciousness adverts to it. It opens itself to it. It exposes itself to it. This is avarjana. So, this internal frame of reference, the subjective frame of reference, they call the buddhi, and without the external agents like the place of enjoyment, place of experience, the instruments of experience, and the experiencing objects, experienced objects, this has no role to play. Purusha has no role to play unless the Prakriti is actively evolving. And Purusha has no purpose to fulfill in the absence of the Prakriti that evolves. And at no time can you think of a Prakriti without Purusha, nor Purusha without Prakriti. The two are inseparably, invariably, and for all time related with each other. And they are involved in the work. They have a beautiful simile for it. There is a blind man and there is a lame man. The lame man can't walk. The blind man can't see. But they perform the journey together. They travel together. The lame man climbs on the shoulders of the blind man and shows the way the blind man walks. Purusha is the lame man. The consciousness doesn't act. It has no means of acting. It's not orientational. It's not operational. But Prakriti can't see. It is devoid of consciousness. This consciousness is devoid of materiality. But the two together function like this, like the blind man and the pangvandhayoho yiva. Pangu is the lame man, andha is the blind man. So consciousness rides on material stuff, and then the entire evolution takes place. The entire world comes into existence. Well, the Sankhyans point out there are two purposes which the Purusha has to fulfill as a result of his interminable association with the Prakriti. The first one is what is called the bhoga, experience, which is of three types, trivarga, dharma, artha and kama. And please remember, Sankhyans were the first people to give the guidelines for the individual life in terms of the Purusharthas. Purushartha is the objective of a Purusha. And the objective of a Purusha is in the Sankhyan context. So Purushartha, which we normally use, Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, but this comes from the Sankhyan school. So Trivarga, which alone is recognized in the early phases, is Dharma, Artha and Kama. Kama is the desires of man, which are to be fulfilled. And Artha is the wherewithal for it, the means of fulfilling these desires, Artha. And the constraints which the society imposes upon the individual is the Dharma. So the Dharma, Artha, Kama, these three are considered to be the bhoga. Every individual has desires and he acquires the means by means of which the desires are fulfilled, and there are constraints, there are limitations which are there for him to follow. Purusha has this bhoga as one of the main objectives to be achieved due to his association with the Prakriti. So Prakriti Purusha coming together will serve the bhoga purpose. But this invariably leads to dukkha. Dukkha of three types. the Sankhyan texts start with Tapatraya bhigata jigyasa tatapagata ke hetau. They speak of the Tapatraya. I don't know if in the North Indian languages this Tapatraya is very frequently used. In the South Indian languages it is very frequently used, Tapatraya. And when a man is in distress, you ask him, how are you? Oh, Tapatraya. So this Tapatraya is very frequently used in Tamil, Telugu and Kannada to represent the existential illness of man. It's called Tapatraya. Three kinds, three types, these three strands of distress. Tapa is heat or dukkha, Traya is triad, a triad of suffering. What are the three? The first group is Adhyatmika. Adhyatmika is not spiritual as it generally means. Adhyatmika refers to the body and the mind. Atma, Dehaha, Manaha iti cha Adhyatmika. The illnesses of the body, illnesses of the mind, the various diseases that body is prone to, the various ailments of the mind like distress, anger, delusion, etc., etc. So the stresses of the body and mind, they are the Adhyatmika. And then there are the Adhi Bhautika. The troubles that we get from the material world, from the fellow beings, from thieves, from robbers, from snakes, from tigers, etc. Vyagrachoradi. So Adi Bhautika is whatever troubles we get from the outside, whatever we invite from our surrounding. This is Adi Bhautika. And the unforeseen calamities, like a lightning striking down a man, or a fatal illness which suddenly strikes, these are called the Adi Daivika. Daivika is unforeseen calamities. So these are the three kinds of distresses that everyone is prone to: Adhyatmika, Adi Daivika and Adi Bhautika. Well, Bhoga naturally involves these three kinds of distresses, and to get relieved from these distresses there are several ways, like diseases of the body are to be cured by medicine. Diseases of the mind could be cured by the psychologist, not by all psychologists, not by psychologists, but by magic, incantation, sorcery, witchcraft, etc., etc., mantra maya adi. Well, the Adi Bhautika illnesses, they could be controlled by the individual not venturing out too much. And there are whole series of prescriptions which are given to individuals. Na ekaha charet, one should not move about alone. Na ativadecha, one should not talk too much. So there is a whole list of things, like do's and don'ts given to guard oneself from the troubles that come from others. Well, Adi Daivika has various rituals, various pujas, tapas, swadhyaya, to prevent the unforeseen calamities from striking us. But the Sankhyans say these are only palliatives. A disease will cure an illness, but the drug will cure a disease, but the drug will not prevent the disease from occurring again. So these illnesses are likely to recur, likely to come with greater and greater vigor. But the one sure way of undoing all illness is by knowing for certain who is the experiencer, who is the witness, and where is the experience being felt or received. So this Viveka, or the distinction between the Prakriti and the Purusha, Our troubles are there because we fail to distinguish between the Prakriti aspect of us and the Purusha aspect of us. So once we can distinguish between them, when we can bring about a sort of a cleavage in operation between the Purusha and the Prakriti, Prakriti will fail to impress us with any of its own weapons. So this Viveka again is a Sankhyan term. Viveka is a discrimination. Vivichyate idam Purusha iyam Prakriti iti. So this is Prakriti, this is Purusha. When this is done, this is called the Kaivalya. Purusha is with the Prakriti, but he is no longer dominated by the Prakriti. He knows for certain the limitations of the Prakriti, and the Purusha remains untrammeled. So when a person reaches that stage, it's called the Kaivalya. Kaivalya is isolation. Kevala is alone. Kaivalya is isolation. The individual becomes isolated from the Prakriti. So he is with the Prakriti, but he fails to recognize its independent role. And the Sankhyans again posit a state of liberation which is in this life, which they call the Jivan Mukti. An individual who has reached this stage of Kaivalya, he will be equipped with his body. He will do the normal things that any ordinary man does. He eats, he drinks, he sleeps, he goes about, he does everything. But he remains untouched by any distress or sorrow, because his consciousness is removed from the material vestment or equipment that he has. Well, the Sankhyans for the first time gave a complete framework of philosophy for India, both a description of reality, the sadhana aspect, and the goals to be achieved. And the other major contribution of the Sankhyans is the concept of the gunas, the three gunas, triguna. Prakriti is not any material stuff that is out there. So you can't say, here was the material stuff, here was consciousness. The two came together, and that was responsible for the world. Prakriti is essentially a process. Prakriti is not a substance. Prakriti merely means the three gunas that are inherent in it, the three proclivities, the three inclinations which are inherent in it. And the three are sattva, rajas and tamas, which we all know in some manner or other. Sattva is being. It is described as the poise and the happiness that comes as a result of balance. Sthiti, sthitimatvat sukham sattvam ityuchyate. It is being. When an individual he is happy because there is nothing to distract him, there is nothing to trouble him. Rajas is activity, movement, dynamism, operation, and this is becoming. When the individual he is not troubled. When he becomes, all the troubles come into being. So this rajas or becoming, a change, dynamism, activity, process, this will result in dukkha, because all activity is stressful. It involves stress, dukkha. And the third is that which obstructs both the sattva and the rajas. The poise is impeded, the sukha is impeded, activity also is obstructed, and the dukkha also is mitigated. This is the third guna called the tamas or indolence, lack of activity, but it is not poise. So there are many individuals who are not active, but they are not necessarily sattvic in character. They are indolent. And this is moha, infatuation, delusions, clouding. So every process in the universe has these three involvements: sattva, rajas and tamas. And sattva is responsible for wakefulness. Rajas is responsible for dream. Sattva is responsible for sleep. So there are the tamas is responsible for sleep according to the Sankhyan system. Well, everything in the universe is a concatenation of the three gunas in various proportions: sattva, rajas and tamas. The mahat, the initial mahat which came into existence, the stress out of which the entire evolution took place, this is the representation of the rajas. But normally these three gunas are in an equipoise. This is called the samyavastha. The three gunas are undistinguished, indistinguishable. One, actually the word guna is of uncertain origin. Guna in Sanskrit has no etymology according to the Paninian grammar. So guna has been variously interpreted to mean guna is the three strands of the thread which together form the rope. A rope has many strands which are woven into it. So the three gunas are the three processes like this which are woven, and every individual is like a rope constituted out of these three strands. So every individual has the sattva, raja. Not only every individual, everything in the universe has these three ingredients: sattva, rajas and tamas. And the triguna is also responsible for the three types of individuals which Bhagavad Gita details: the sattvika types, the rajasa types and the tamasa types of people. Well, the Sankhyans point out that the three gunas, when they hold the Purusha to ransom, this is bondage or bandha. When the Purusha discovers that all this is a play of the gunas, and those of you who are familiar with the Bhagavad Gita will remember Krishna saying, Guna guneshu vartanta iti matva nasajjate. When an individual recognizes that these are the play of the gunas, the three gunas, the individual remains unaffected. Well, the Sankhyans thus gave to us a complete philosophical system. Well, can I go on for a few? You are not jaded in mind. It does not. Because oftentimes talking is easier than listening. To listen, it's more difficult to listen. Well, the Samkhya, like Purusha and Prakriti, is invariably, inevitably associated with yoga. Yoga has a very hoary antiquity. Even in the Rig Veda you find the mention of yoga and the yogins. Perhaps the tribal practices of various types, magicians, sorcerers and witchcraft practitioners, and people who contort their bodies and minds to achieve what is dubiously called the health, etc., etc. These were always there, not only today. Today you find yogins of various types: yoga for this illness, that illness, yoga for health, yoga for ill health, yoga for confusion, yoga for clarity, all sorts of yoga. They have always been there in the country. And At some period of time, the Samkhya background, the Samkhya framework was added to it. And Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is dated the 1st century BC, Patanjali was only redacting the yoga. His Yoga Sutra starts with Atha Yoga Anushasanam. So, Anushasana is redacting. I now present to you in brief what the yoga people have said from time immemorial. This is Anushasanam. This prescription following a tradition which antedates it. Well, so Patanjali presupposes a long tradition of yoga, and this yoga and Samkhya are always perceived as twin systems in our country. Mahabharata recognizes it, and even in the Bhagavad Gita you find a statement, Ekam Sankhyamcha Yogancha Yadviduhu. One who recognizes the yoga is the same as the Samkhya, they really know, he really knows. Well, the Samkhya is sometimes called Nirishvara Yoga. It's yoga system minus the Ishvara element. Whereas the yoga is called Seshvara Samkhya. Yoga is Samkhya system plus the Ishvara factor. So Ishvara, as not in the popular conception of the term, Ishvara is one of the objects for concentration. Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. There is a sutra in Yoga Sutra. You can achieve the concentration by many ways, in many ways. One of the upayas is Ishvara Pranidhana, concentrating on the God. So the God comes in a very marginal fashion in the yoga. It is totally absent in the Samkhya. Sankhyans have no use for God. The yoga people have a very marginal use for God, like he also ran. So God also is there. You can make use of him. So this is called Seshvara Samkhya. Well, the word yoga has two derivations. One, yuj samadhau, in the sense of concentration, focusing the attention, absorption, in the sense of samadhi. Samadhi, the word, is not losing all semblance of life, but samyak adhiyate manaha asmin iti samadhi. To focus all your mental faculties on one object to the exclusion of all distractions. This is samadhi. Samadhi is totality of consciousness, totality of attention being placed on a particular. So yuja samadhau is the totality of consciousness. What happens normally in life is our consciousness is fragmented. It's frittered. You hear a word, the mind goes there. You hear a sound, your mind goes there. And your body aches, the mind goes there. Normally consciousness is not solid. Consciousness is not concentrated, not focused on one particular. It is distracted. It is scattered. So the yoga is a method by means of which the mind, which is naturally kshipta, vikshipta, moodha, etc., I'll come to it a little later, this is gathered together, focused on one particular aspect. This is one meaning of the word yoga, yuja samadhau. There is another etymological derivation of the word yoga, yujir yoge, union, joining, bringing together. This is yoga. And you often read that union of the self with the God is yoga. Yujir samadhu, yujir yoge. But Patanjali, his tradition of yoga is not as union, There is nothing to be united. There are no two principles to be united in the yoga system or in the Samkhya system. In fact, pum prakrityor viyoga eva yoga. Yoga actually means viyoga, separation. It's not union, it's not conjunction. Yoga is separation. Pum prakrityoho viyoga eva yoga. In Sanskrit is a very curious language. One would almost say funny language, because we have a habit of using some words in exactly the contrary connotation. You have the word, for example, udasina, and I suppose in all dialects udasina means one who is indolent, one who is indifferent, one who is slothful. Udasina is one who does not care, one who is lax. But the word actually means utu asina, one who is erect and alert. The word means erect and alert, but it has come to be indifferent, lax, slothful. Like that, yoga here does not mean a union of two things, it is the separation of the Purusha and the Prakriti. All this confusion has resulted from the false conjunction of the Purusha and the Prakriti. So the goal before us is to separate the Purusha principle from the Prakriti. Pum prakrityoho viyoga eva yoga. Yoga is actually viyoga. Well, the yoga system therefore starts with a basic definition. The sutra, the literature in Indian philosophy is very interesting. They follow a methodological device which is almost modern in its orientation. They circumscribe the field of their inquiry. Then they posit the major concepts that are used, and each concept is defined. And when the definition is given, there is the anvaya vyatireka nyayat. What are the other words which have the same connotation? They are distinguished from all that. And then they go to point out the relation between these words. So it's very systematically drawn. In the Yoga Sutra, which is an example of this clarity of thought and brevity, the first sutra speaks of the field of inquiry. Adha yoga anushasanam. We are not interested in anything excepting this yoga, which is being prescribed anew. But what is this yoga? Immediately a sutra follows, yogas chitta vritti nirodhaha. Yoga has several meanings. A dictionary in Sanskrit called Medini gives as many as 38 different meanings for the word yoga. It includes what is very relevant today, deceit, shathyam, mayacha, yogamiti. Yoga is deceiving people, sleight of hand, this is yoga. Confusing people, maya iti. So all these are given by Medini as definitions of yoga, as meanings of yoga, and many of them are well taken care of now. Well, yoga has many meanings, but what is the exact meaning in which you use the term? So Patanjali knows that yoga has many meanings. So yoga, Patanjali undertakes to define the yoga according to him. Yoga chitta vritti nirodhaha. Yoga is the suppression, the restraining of all the modalities of the chitta. What is this chitta? Chitta is the play of these three gunas. Sattva rajas tamasam vikara eva chittam iti. So the individual has this equipment, this aspect, which is made up of the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. They are continually tearing him apart. They are continually involving him in distress and trouble. This yoga seeks to restrain the vrittis of the chitta, the modalities, the processes, the modifications of this chitta, so that the individual could remain in his own natural condition. And Patanjali says the purpose of this chitta vritti nirodha is swarupe avasthanam, to dwell in one's own natural state without being troubled by temptations, distractions, etc., etc. Swarupe avasthanam. So the yoga sets about controlling the chitta and